All right, folks. Thanks for joining us for this afternoon. I hope you had a good lunch break, those of you that were with us for the morning as well. It's a long day today, and I find that doing workshops 3 and 4 together in one day can be very exhausting, at least from the mental capacity that's required. There's a lot to learn, and quite often the challenge is not having the time to practice it, right? And so because we're doing this via webinar, it can be a little bit challenging too, because you're trying to follow along as well as maybe try some things out at the same time. So it's understandable. We'll try to address any questions that come up as best as we can. And this workshop, in case you aren't sure if you're in the correct place, is workshop 4. We're talking about authentic online assessment. And that's true, Kathleen, there will be a recording that will be sent to you, so you can review that too at any time, and then you can review the things that I have shown you during the screen sharing as well. Okay, my information has not changed since this morning. It's still me. But if for some reason you don't get a recording link after the session, or you have questions, or you need access to any content, you can always email me, and I'm happy to just send that out to you. This afternoon's agenda, it looks very sparse, but believe me, it can get very in-depth. So there's a lot of good conversation that happens around assessment, and so I'll be looking forward to that. So we have the demo course issue has been fixed. They have actually been using the later set of demo numbers, so I'll give you a course that will work. And then we'll talk a little bit about evaluating student learning, and we'll be looking at, we'll be viewing, and we'll be creating, and then we'll also be grading assignments and tests, and talking a little bit about the survey tool and how it works. And I'll give you a preview of workshop 5, what is all involved in the last workshop, and how to teach and manage your course. Okay. Thank you. And this is also just a quick refresher too. The recording of the webinars is fantastic, but you can also get video tutorials from Blackboard themselves on how to do any of the things that I've shown you to do today. Okay. And the bundler link is there for you as well. We talked this morning, if you're interested in finding rubrics, one of the blocks on that bundler, one of the links on there, will take you to some pre-made rubrics that you could upload into your Blackboard. Okay. So our focus today is on another area in the instructor tool panel. We talked about building content already. We talked about some tools, and we're going to be spending this afternoon in the assessment area. The assessment menu includes elements that serve as ways to evaluate student learning, right? So we want you to think of that not just in the context of a test per se, although a test is certainly one way to evaluate. And within the test, you will see that there are numerous types of test questions, and some that are probably going to be new to you as well, that will help you get at what students know in unique and creative ways. The tools offer you an opportunity to rethink how assessment can occur in your course, because sometimes using an assignment, for example, might be something that counts as a test, or something that works as a project, or something that can be done as a group activity. So we'll be talking a little bit more about how to rethink kind of what it is that we do to assess student learning. Okay, at this point, I just want to take a little poll. If you would like to contribute, just raise your hand. I'll call on you. These are 3 questions to think about. If you'd like to share on any of them, feel free to raise your hand. I'm wondering who would like to tell us what types of evaluation you do in your course, or maybe how you measure student learning. And also, if anybody provides student choice when it comes to activities and assignments. So, in other words, you're not giving just one option, maybe you have multiple choices. So David has said that he has 2 essays, daily quizzes, midterm final, and then also grades for participation and attendance. And David, is that also in an online course or only in a face-to-face? Face-to-face, okay. And I was just questioning because sometimes those who teach fully online, one of their biggest challenges is how do they assess participation and attendance. So that, that can become a good point of conversation as well. Linda says that she uses written assignments and exams. Students can choose essay questions for the exams. Okay, so you provide choice, you work that into the assessment itself. Great. Yeah, quite often that's true. Those that like to kind of hide in the shadows in the classroom are the ones that tend to, really excel online. They can get themselves out there a little bit. So, yep, self-checks, formative self-checks. We do a lot of diagnostic kinds of things too, pre and post tests. So looking outside of the box of formative assessments, right? Okay. This is a chart that we use a lot just to try to kind of simplify when we're trying to figure out an activity or a lesson that will reach different levels. This helps because it asks the question, but then it also gives you some actual tangible things that you can do. You can have students evaluate or compare, contrast, or whatever it might be. So when we're looking at multiple choice questions, they tend to be at the basic level of remembering. Can the student recall or remember the information? And then if it's a well-crafted multiple choice question, sometimes that can bring them up to the next tier. Can they actually explain ideas or concepts? Still, they're choosing from a predetermined list of answers. When we get students to apply by the case studies, for example, or the scenario-based learning, we're asking them to use information in a new way, right? And then when we get into using debates, or we have students take a stand on something, we're asking them to evaluate. And then finally, with the creating, and I found it so interesting, Kathleen, that you said the one that no one chooses is the one where they have to create their own, right? Too funny, but can students create a new product or point of view? And a lot of our project-based learning gets into this if it's well-crafted and helps students take everything that they've learned along the way here and put it into practice, so synthesize their learning in order to create a product, right? So maybe they have to design a project plan for something, or maybe they are coming up with, a new way to arrange a room to meet a disability need, or if it's something in engineering. So you can kind of think of a lot of these different ways to do this. These can all be assignments. They can be activities in a course. They can be group projects within a course, right? So sometimes our traditional assessment keeps us at the lower level of the taxonomy, and we're really trying to move students up the ladder to more authentic learning, because we are trying to see, can they apply what they have learned, not just sort of tell it back to us, but can they actually use it in new and unique ways. So that's sort of the foundation of what we'll be talking about when we get into the Blackboard tools and how those can accommodate this kind of thing. So this time, if you would like to be inside of a demo course, the numbers that we're using are 31 through 55. The lower numbers that I gave you this morning are actually disabled right now, so that makes a lot of sense. If you would like to continue in your own sandbox or practice course that your campus provides, you're more than welcome to work in there. The demo courses do have a sample test, sample assignment, and they have student submissions as well. Okay. So if you would like to go to that one, you would want to navigate to the bbsupport.sln.suny.edu, and you can pick a number between 31 and 55. Okay. And let's say I pick the number 45. I would just type demo 45 like that, all one word, and the password would be SUNY, all in capital letters. I'm going to begin my app sharing at this point so that I can take you into a course. Now, once you are logged in your course list, there will be a training course with your number. So I logged in as demo 40, so my course, of course, is training 40. Okay, that's the course that you want to get into. And then when you're in that course, you'll land at the course homepage, just like this. Notifications is where you land when you enter one of our demo courses. I know it would be nice if it said homepage or something more specific, right? Good, you're in the right place. So what we want to do here, first of all, just to learn your way around, On the left-hand side is how you will navigate this course. So right here where it says lessons, that is where all of the course content is. Okay? So we're actually going to click on lessons, and we'll go in and take a look at an assignment. We're going to start with assignments first. So click on lessons in the left navigation. And so the course is open now. You have course information, a student coffee house, and then there are some sample modules underneath that. Okay. One of the folders, the second icon from the bottom, is called example content. And in here are samples of some of the things that we looked at this morning and that we will be looking at this afternoon. So I'm going to open example content. And I'm going to scroll down to an assignment that's called Tablet and Textbook Debate. It is up on my screen if you want to reference it. This is an example of an assignment that was assigned to a group. When you create assignments, you can assign them to individual students or to a group of students. Okay? They look exactly the same, except one is for a group and one is for individuals. So in this case, you'll see that the icon is the pencil and the ruler in the paper. That's your icon to denote that you are using a Dropbox, an assignment space. Okay? It has the title of the assignment, and then it has the directions here for the students, a little bit of background, and it tells them to prepare a position paper in their group and present their opinions during their next debate. Now, all they're doing here in this assignment space is they are going to upload their position paper. It's an electronic Dropbox for them to be able to submit their work. That's really what an assignment tool in Blackboard is for. You saw that if you used Angel before. Moodle has something similar. Okay. Now, if you want to look at what it looks like for the students, you can turn off your editing mode, but you can also just go right here into the assignment. If you click on the title of it, you can go in. So yes, Maureen, an assignment is a Dropbox. Same terminology. Okay. So we'll click on the title of this assignment, and we will enter inside. And here's what it tells the student. There's some assignment information that they get. They get the date that it's due. They get how many points are possible. And again, here the instructions appear again. And you can scroll on down, and you can see that there's a place for them to submit. So, assignment submission. They have the option to click the button to write their own submission, which means they have this box and they can type it in, right? Or they can attach a file by browsing their computer. Now, content collection is a separate issue. It's sort of a file storage system that's built into Blackboard, but that's not typically how students are going to get files into the course. Okay. And then, of course, it says group name because this particular assignment was assigned to the JETS group. Otherwise, it would just be individual students. Now, if you remember before, those of you that used Angel previously, you had the option to choose between writing the submission or attaching the file. In Blackboard, you don't get to turn either of those off. You get them both. And so in your directions, you need to be clear to students how you want to receive their information. Do you want them to type it right here in the text box, or would you prefer that they attach their documents? Now, sometimes they're going to have to attach it, right, because it's a PowerPoint, or it's an Excel spreadsheet, or something else. If it's a Word document, like a paper, they could type it in. They could also type it in Word and then copy and paste it into the text submission box. But I will show you when we grade why it's very nice to have file attachments. There's a special grading tool that allows you to annotate right on the student paper, but only if they attach it. Okay? And then, of course, a student can give you a comment if they need to say something about it. And then they would simply submit and send it to you, or they could save it as a draft. Yes, Linda, anyone in the group can submit the assignment. So if it's a group assignment, it warrants you to be specific about either choosing someone to submit for the group, or you could also make sure that their file naming convention includes their group name, something like that, so that you will know when you go to the submission, right? What it actually does when you submit for a group is it actually submits a copy of it in each person, for each person in the group. So when you go into the grade book, that particular submission is in everyone's gradebook column. Yeah, it allows one submission unless you set it up to allow multiple, Maureen, because when you go in to do the settings, you can choose multiple submissions, and then you can tell it what to do with those. Do you want it to average the grade, take the highest, right, all those things. Okay, so we'll see that on the back end when we make it. They can submit multiple times, so whether that's the same submission or multiple unique submissions, it doesn't matter. It just opens the Dropbox for an X number of submissions. All right, so that is an assignment Dropbox. That is what the space looks like for your students. So I'm just going to hit cancel here so that I can go back to my learning area. And I want to now build an assignment Dropbox. Okay, I just saw what one looks like. I want to build one now and learn about the settings that I might need. Okay, so Connie says, I'm thinking about having a unique grade for each student in the group. So you can have a group Dropbox and each student submits something different as part of the project. You could do that too. And you can grade them individually, regardless. Even if they submit one for everybody in the group, you're going to give everybody a grade. And you can always override grades for individual users in the Grade Center. So should you have to add on or take off points for somebody maybe who didn't work well in the group and that kind of thing, you can make those adjustments. Okay? All right, so where we are now is in the lessons area. I'm actually inside the example content folder, but you don't have to be. It doesn't matter where you build in these demo courses. In order to find the tool for an assignment, it's actually under Assessment. Okay, so this is the menu that we're using right now. I have Assessments, and I want to go down here to Assignment and select that one. And you can build one with me if you'd like. Assessments, Assignment. That's true, Marcia. Group submissions are viewable by everyone in a group. It's not, a group is only private to its users, so no, you can't make the submissions private. Unless you did a journal. And we did talk about, I don't know if you were with us this morning, Marcia, but we did talk about a journal, and you can have group journals, so you can make those private. But other than that, any submissions in a group are public to the group. Okay. So I am in my editor for the assignment, and of course I need a name. Yes, the journal is private, David. That's what I'm saying. She was asking for a way to have a private submission, and that's the only tool that's private. So I'm going to call this, so let's see, it's an essay on creative teaching methods. Why not? Inspired by Carol. So essay on creative teaching methods. And then here are my instructional area. I need to give the student some description about what I want them to do. What's really nice is that I actually have a lot more options than what you think about. I certainly could type my instructions to the students here. And I could say, you know, I want a 500-word essay and I want it to include X, Y, and Z, which is fine. But if I open up my editor here, you'll notice I also have the opportunity to do that video everywhere. So I could record something that I want the students to use or think about. I could also pull in a mashup. So I could give them a YouTube video. And I could say, here's something that I want you to reflect on. If I use the video everywhere, I could give them an example of a recording, and they can submit a video everywhere recording as their assignment. because remember they get that text box where they could write their submission, and this little icon is in it. So not only could they attach an assignment, type a submission, but they could also record their submission if they wanted to, or if that was a choice I gave them. Okay? So you have a lot of options here to think a little bit more creatively about how you not only deliver information and instructions to students, but also how you ask them to contribute their assignment back to you. Okay, so where instructions are explained for students. All right. So that is where, and you could type something in here just as a placeholder so that you can see where it'll show up. This is where your instructions go. And again, if you want them to attach, you have to tell them, okay? Because they get both choices. So you have to tell them if they should attach a file or type their submission. So we're going to move down and take a look at other settings. I have the option to attach files here if there is something that they might need. Now maybe I have a Word document or a PDF that's sort of like a worksheet that I want them to fill in and then save and then submit back. In here I can do that. It might be an Excel spreadsheet that they have to manipulate somehow and send back to me. Maybe I have a file that is an audio recording, like a podcast that I want them to listen to before they write their paper. It could be any number of things. It could also be a rubric that I'm going to grade them by. Maybe I don't have a rubric in Blackboard, but I have an old one in Word, let's say, and I can attach it here to say to the students, this is how I'm grading you. Or it might be just a sheet of paper that says, here's what an A is, here's what a B is, here's what a C is, as far as what I'm looking for when I'm grading. The due date feature, very similar to what we talked about before. If I select this box, it will set a due date on the calendar and give students notifications that this assignment will be due. Students can still submit after this date, but it will be marked late. The only way to prohibit submissions is to close this Dropbox after a certain date, right? The other way to prohibit submissions is to only allow one. And so after they've made one, they cannot make another one, even if the Dropbox is open. Okay. Now for this part here, the grading looks for the possible points. And again, it can be a percentage. If you are doing something out of 100, you could do 100 points, which is 100%, because you're going to tell the grade book how you want it to display to students, as points, as percentages, and all of that. Okay, so you're going to set that up separately. But maybe it's just a 25-point assignment. So it could be, you know, whatever you like, however your grading is. So if it's an essay, out of what would you give the score? You can add a rubric if you have one. You either have to already have it created or you can create a new one here. And then there are 3 separate areas under grading that you have to click to open up. Okay, so there's some embedded settings here. The submission details is the first one. And if you click to open that, this is where you can choose whether it is an individual submission or a group submission. The portfolio submission is a specific setting that campuses would have to turn on if they have the portfolio function. It's a separate building block. So if you have that turned on, it just means that the students are uploading several things as part of the assignment, and they will all be grouped into a portfolio. Okay. And then this is also where you set the number of attempts, single, multiple, or even unlimited if you want. So you can think about if you're going to have a rough draft and a final copy. Do you want 2 separate assignment drop boxes, one for each? Or do you want to just set this Dropbox to 2 attempts so that you can accept both the draft and the final copy in the same place? It's just a matter of your preference for management. But if you select multiple attempts, It'll ask you for the number, and then it will ask you for what to do about scoring them. Do you want to score the highest grade, the first attempt? Do you want to average the two? Right? So if you give multiple attempts, you then have to tell it how grading is going to work. In this case, I'm going to keep it at a single attempt. Grading options, if you expand that, you have the option to enable anonymous grading. That's for you, the instructor, so that while you're grading a submission, you do not see the student name. Okay, that's what that means. So if that's something that at any point you would want to do, you can check that so that it's still, the submission is still connected to the student in the gradebook, but when you're actually grading and evaluating that work, you don't see the student name. You can also enable delegated grading. That means that you can select a grader from your roster. You know, if you have a co-instructor or something like that, someone who might be in your course and able to grade. Probably many of us don't have that luxury. And then we have the display of grades. So how do you want the grades to display to the student? I'm going to scroll this up a little bit. The primary is the grade that the student sees. Okay? So do you want the students to see a score, which is a point? You can have them see a letter, for example, A, B, C, D, right? So they got a C on the paper. Do you want them to see text? In other words, you're going to put in the text. So it could be pass, fail. It could be, you know, fair, poor, great, whatever kind of wording you want. Or you can put in a percentage. You can also put complete or incomplete. Sometimes we just need the drop box for the students to submit something for us, and we're just going to check off if it was completed or not. Okay, so you can decide on the primary display. Now the secondary display is only visible by the instructor in the grade book. The secondary is not visible to the student. So let's say that you have a score and it's something that's out of 20 points, but then you want in parentheses to see the percentage out of 100. Or you might have the score as a percentage and the secondary could be a letter. So you'll see the percentage as an 80 and the secondary display in parentheses will be a B, B minus. Okay? So you get to choose this here, and again, the secondary is only visible by you. The next box here is asking whether or not you want to include this assignment and the score in the grade center calculation. Okay? So obviously, if an assignment is graded anonymously, they're not going to include the grade in the column, okay, unless you come back in here and uncheck anonymous. Then that turns on all the student names and it sends their grades to the grade book. So you can grade anonymously, but then you have to come back in and turn the anonymous off. Okay? Perhaps there's a time where you wouldn't want to include something in the calculations. You might come in and decide, you know, that the assignment wasn't really well crafted or all the students did poorly, so you're just not going to count it in the calculations. You could uncheck it here. These are also things that you can do in the grade center itself. You can override a column or you can choose to ignore a grade. So there are other things that you can do there. And then this last one is about showing it to students. Now students don't have a grade book like you do. They have something called My Grades. And My Grades is a panel where it has the assignment, how much it was worth, when it was due, when they submitted it, what score they got, and so forth. And we'll look more at the student grades in Workshop 5, but you get to check this box as to whether or not the students should see the grade on this assignment. Okay. And then you can also show statistics. If this is something that you like, that you think is helpful for students see this. They would see the average grade in the class for this assignment, and they would see the median grade as well. Okay? So you can choose whether this is something that you want to share with students. The availability section, this should be familiar to you from other things that we've done. You can limit the availability with date ranges. So this assignment is only available from this date to this date. And by available, what we mean is it's visible or it's hidden, okay? So that's your availability there, and that's how you configure. So before we submit, just want to make sure, if you scroll back through, is there any question on a setting that you have before we submit this assignment? So let me submit this here. There we go. And as with everything that Blackboard does, it puts it at the bottom of this list. So one of the things I can do is use these double arrows to move things up. If your drag and drop ever doesn't work, these little arrows here are the keyboard accessible, and they can move things for you. So I can use this, find my essay, and just use these arrows to bump it up in the list. And then once I submit, it brings it up right here, okay? Another way to do that is just to grab on the yellow bar and drag and drop it, okay? So now the question was on adaptive release. So adaptive release is actually set once you've made the Dropbox. You have to come into this little drop-down arrow right next to the title, and that's where you can set adaptive release rules, okay? And you can do some advanced release rules as well if you need multiple. So by adaptive release, we mean that it has to be that there are certain things that are contingent, right? And we don't go into a lot of this, so if you have further questions on this, let me know. But you could choose a student, right? And once you choose that student, you can give them different dates for visibility, like up here. Did that answer your question? Is that Marsha, I think? Okay. So yes, you can do it. You just have to create it first and then come in and set those rules. Okay? Okay, so we've viewed an assignment Dropbox. We've created one. Are there any questions before I show you how to grade them? Now, it's interesting because when we graded the discussion forum, we actually went into the discussion forum to grade because that's where all of the posts live, right? If we click on this assignment to go into it, we're only going to get the assignment information and the place where we can submit. So this is not going to give us the student submissions, all right? We have to get the student submissions by going to the Grade Center. So before I take you there, I just want to preface this by saying that the Grade Center seems to be very intriguing for people. And I can very easily lose people because, you know, you want to explore and check it all out, which is fine, and feel free to do that. But you may miss some of the grading when we get there, okay? Okay. All right, so we are going to, here's how you get to the Grade Center to access all of the submissions. Over on the left, I mentioned that this is the navigation for students, but if you keep going down, there's a course management area right down here. This control panel is how instructors manage their course. And you can see that there are a lot of things in here. You can manage your tools here. You can manage your groups here. You can do your export, import, archive, all over here. But we're actually going to click on where it says Grade Center. Okay? Grade Center is really robust. There's a lot to it. So if we looked at the full Grade Center, we would have a lot of things that we'd be looking at. Underneath full Grade Center, there are two breakouts. There's assignments and there's tests. These are called Smart Views. And Smart Views are a way to set up so that you can only see a section of your gradebook at a time. If you think about after the semester gets underway, you have some assignments, some tests, possibly some discussion forums, maybe some other activities. Your Grade Center will get really long and you'll be scrolling over and scrolling over until you find what you need. If I only want to see tests or I only want to see assignments, I can click on one of these Smart Views and it's going to show me my Grade Center, but only with those columns. So I don't have to look at everything at once or scroll through everything to find something, okay? So for this purpose today, we're going to click on the one that says Assignments, okay? So I'm in my Course Management panel under Grade Center, And I'm going to click Assignments. Okay, so here is a grade book, and it's only the part of my grade book that has assignments. Okay, I asked for that when I chose that Smart View. And you should have a scrolling bar on the bottom. If you don't have a scrolling bar right here like I do, you can simply click on any cell and just move your cursor over, and it'll move you over. Okay. You'll notice on the left part of my grade book I have the student last name and first name, and it's grayed out a little bit. That's because those are frozen columns. It doesn't matter how far over I scroll, those names always stay right there. So I'm not scrolling all the way over and forgetting whose row I'm on when I'm looking at it, right? So that's a bit of a nice feature. Those frozen columns are really helpful. So if you scroll over, you're going to see certain columns that have these green exclamation points, okay? The green exclamation points mean that there is a submission there waiting for you to grade. That's the icon that tells you needs grading. And there are many more icons that you'll see. In this case, we're going to take a look at how to grade some of these. So all you need to do is find a column that has these green exclamation points, and that's going to be the assignment that you'll pretend to grade today. Needs grading equals homework for the instructor. You got it, Kathleen. That's your homework. So I have culinary instructor resume and the coaching assistant letter. So those two columns in my grade book seem to have the needs grading symbol. So I'll take this culinary one, and in order to collect your submissions, you're going to use this little drop-down arrow that is on the title of the column, okay, because I want to get them all. If I only wanted one, I would drop it down on the individual student, but I actually want all of them. So if I click the arrow at the top, a lot of choices in here. It's just incentive to come back for workshop 5, right? And learn about all these great things. So in this drop-down menu, I want grade attempts. Okay. I'm going to make sure everybody's with me. So when you get there, you can click on grade attempts. Great, David. Good, we'll get you all set up. So you drop down on the column and you select grade attempts. And here's what it does. It pulls up the student submissions for you, okay, in order. Now, I don't know about you, but that's really tiny for me to read. So I'm going to give myself a little bit more space. I'm going to show you how to do that. In between the menu on the left and this grading panel, can you see if I hover my cursor over, I get this little gray arrow? I can close that. Now I have some more space. Okay? It's still over there. If I go over there, I can open it back up. But sometimes it's nicer to just close that navigation panel so I can have more space here to grade the student work. Okay? You can also come over here in the assignment details in this dark gray area. There's an arrow to click there and close the grading panel too, so that you can work on the paper, and then you can open the grading when you're ready to enter the grade. Okay? So that's up to you. Now, what is this? This is something called inline grading, and it's a really fun feature, especially if students have attached their assignments. So this is the value of doing it that way. If they type in their text submission, you don't have full annotation abilities, okay? So what do you mean, Erin? How can I annotate? So here's what you can do. If you click on the comments button, you get a couple of these tools. You have a, I'm going to skip this comment one for a minute. You've got the drawing tool, and then you've got a highlighter, you have a text tool, and you have strikeout. And then you have these comments here. Right now, any of the Microsoft Office products work fine. You could put in a PowerPoint here. You could do an Excel spreadsheet, PDF, Word. But RTF files do not work very well. So there's a little bit of a pro and a con, you know, to doing this, right? So then you would still, you've probably used this before, if you open a submission in Word, you can use the review feature in Word. It does the same thing. In fact, it's more robust, of course, than Crocodocs, but I'm not sure if that's something that you're using on your campus. One of the other things, too, if you can't do that, you do have some more flexibility over here in the grading panel when I open that, to give some more specific feedback to students, okay? And their submission is always right here as a direct link, so you can click it and download it if you have to, okay? So how does this work? So you can try out some of these features if you want to mark up the student work and see how it works. The point comments, if I click on point comments, I have to put my pointer somewhere, and that's where it points to, so I can leave a comment. Okay, so there's one comment. Another type is the area comment, where you actually select a section to leave a comment on that. For example. And then lastly, you can leave a text comment where you actually put your cursor. You have to insert your cursor. Oh, I have to choose my color. Right, and you can highlight the text and leave a comment on the text. Okay, so let's try out some other things. What else can you do on here? You can, so we looked at the comment features. Now, if you make a comment and you don't want it, if you just hover over your comment, you can delete it. Okay, you can hover over it in the sidebar and get rid of it. That's good to know. That's your undo, because there is no other undo. The drawing tool, if you actually want to draw or, write your comments, you can do that. You can also complete it, or you can select it again and delete it. Okay, so that's up to you. Some people, like to draw to circle instead of using the highlighter. You can draw to give attention. Okay. Yeah, actually, you're right, Kathleen. You can export pages. The RTF is not preferable for Crocodocs, but you can upload a PDF also. Okay. Highlighter works just like you would imagine. It highlights a piece of text. Strikeout. Okay, strikeout. And then you can also type comments directly on the page. So if you click on text and you click on the page, you can type to the student right here. Okay? So you can have fun going forward and editing the student papers. And let's say that you're done. And once you've given the annotations that you need to do, your student is ready to go. And then they can come over here and you can put in the grade for the student. Now notice this did not open until I clicked that box. So you have to come over to the right where it says attempt, and you have to click in the box, and then your grading panel expands. Okay, there's also an arrow, a tiny arrow underneath it if that doesn't work. So I've read this, and I can go ahead and give the student a grade. Now I can also grade by rubric. If your assignment happens to have a rubric attached, you can use this little pop-open square right here, and you can try the functionality of the rubric by simply clicking on a couple different areas, right, just to see what it does. Whenever you use a rubric and you select the different fields that the student achieved, you have to save it. Okay, you have to save it. And then once that is in there, you can give some feedback to the student. This is feedback that is sort of more holistic, right? It's not targeted to something specifically on their page, but I might want to make a comment overall about their assignment. You'll notice in here too, I can attach a file back to them. So maybe I have a sample, or maybe they submitted something and the citations weren't correct. I can give them an example document. I can also put in a link to OWL at Purdue or the APA citation website. Anything that I think will help the student, I can use this feedback for. Okay. Once I'm done, I submit this, and what it will do is bring me up my next student. So here's Ryan, okay? And then I can grade Ryan. Or I can use the arrow and I can go to the next student, and so forth. So you can keep progressing through your students. And when you're done, there's a tiny little exit above the grading panel. And you can click on exit, and it will take you back to the grade center. Now I can see in the grade center that Mason's paper that I graded, it populated the grade for me right here. And it would have continued to populate the grades had I gone through and graded everyone. Okay? So once you go through the grading, everybody's grade gets populated here in the column for you. And if you ever have to override or view somebody's attempt, you simply use the drop-down arrow on that person's column. So if I wanted to look at Mason's again, I would use this drop-down arrow and I would view his attempt. All right, so that was your assignment. That's how we go all full circle from looking at it, creating one, and then grading it. Before I move to assessments, do we have questions on the assignment? Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to preview a test, and you can actually take one in here if you want to be adventurous. We're going to go back over to the navigation menu here. If yours closed, because I showed you how to close it with the gray arrow, you can just click that all the way open again. Okay. I'm going to take you over to where the tests are, so let's go back to lessons. And in the lesson area, there is a folder, if you scroll down, for example content. And we have a test in there. Okay, so let's go in there. Now the test, I hate to tell you, is on the history of ocean exploration and science. So we're all going to do really well, right? It's actually not on that topic. It is simply a test that gives you samples of each of the question types that are available in Blackboard. So you're going to have all kinds of questions on here. So if you want to try to take the test, what we need to do, if you're trying to test out your functionality, you want to turn the edit mode off, because if you just click on the test to open it, it takes you into the settings. So we're going to turn our edit mode off, and that's in the top right corner there. See that little on button? You want to turn that off. Okay. Now you can come over here and you can click on the test to start it. So let's click on the title of it. And this is what it tells the student. Now these are all settings that you are going to determine when you make a test. Your test does not have to look like this. For example, this particular test has a 1 hour limit. You might change that time limit. Okay. This one has a timer setting. They turn the timer on so that the students will know. And then this test also can be saved. You can disable the save button if you don't like that ability. So this test, we can save it and come back and finish it later. And this test also allows multiple attempts. Now for many of the tests that you're going to use, you may just have one attempt, and that's okay. But this is the kind of information that students will be told before they even begin the test. They'll be told how much time they have, that they only have one chance, that they have to submit it in one attempt, they can't save it, you know, that kind of thing. Okay? So this is what they get before they start. And you get to set this up when you create your own test. So let's click the Begin button. You don't have to take this along with me. You can go through these questions if you want to, just to practice what it's like to take a test. But questions 1 and 2 are two different types of mathematical formula questions that you can use. So the first one is simply an equation, and you can just type in any old answer that you want and click Save Answer. If you actually want to do the math and figure it out, more power to you. All right, and in question number 2, we just give An answer there, and click Save. Question number 3 is one of those either-or questions. It can be true, false. It can be yes, no. It can be like, dislike, agree, disagree, those kinds of things. So again, I'm just going to click anything just to complete the questions. You don't actually have to try to do very well unless you want to. Question 4 is a short answer or an essay. They both look the same on the page, but the essay accepts a lengthier response. And I'm not sure of the word limit, honestly, but you can type in something there. Okay, moving down. Question number 5, this is an offline assignment, and so if I created a test that was just question 5, what I'm asking the student to do here is to download the lab activity. There's a link right here to the lab. They have to click it and open it, complete the lab activity. When they're finished, they have to take a photo of their results and then attach it here. Okay? So what they do is, this is the guidelines for completing the lab, and then they take a picture of their completed results and attach it. And then I can come in and evaluate that. Now, I can also set up a Dropbox and just make that an assignment, right? Because you can do the same thing in an assignment. But this is how to make it as part of a test question. So I'm going to intentionally leave this one blank, because I'm not going to browse something. And I also want you to see what happens when you try to submit a test with a blank answer, okay? So we'll see that at the end. Question 6, this is a fill in the blank, but you have to fill it in, as always, you have to spell it correctly, right? Okay. You can put in parameters if you are doing a fill in the blank. You can say, for example, to ignore upper and lower case. You can say, so it's not case sensitive. You can tell it to accept it with an S or without an S. You can put in some things that you think you can anticipate students might do. But fill in the blank is not always as reliable, okay? You can put in a question for number 7. Same idea here. So 6 is the multiple fill in the blanks, and 7 is a singular. Question number 8 is something called a hotspot question. I really like this one. This one's fun. So when you create this question, you upload a picture. And the student, as part of the question, they have to click on the picture where something is. So you might be asking them to identify a body part. You might be asking them to identify a country. In this case, it's asking to select the area where a lack of rainfall would have the largest impact. So I simply clicked on the picture, and it put a little marker there for me. If I decide I clicked on the wrong place, I can actually clear it, and I can click again. There's a clear under the picture, so I can change my mind. Okay. So that's a fun one. There probably are a lot of uses that you could think of for an image. Question number 9. This one is very interesting because you get to populate a Dropbox, which is really fun. And then the Dropbox, you can have more choices than the student actually needs, right? So they have to select things. This is a multiple order, and they have to select things in the correct order, but also from a list of predetermined choices. If the accounting instructor wanted to give an assignment or test requiring students to submit an Excel sheet, okay, would the inline grading work with that? Yeah, you can use Excel. Check breathing. I hope I'm right. Ensure airway, breathing, circulation. Hopefully I don't have to do first aid anytime soon, right? Terrible. All right, question number 10. Question number 10 is actually a matching question, but it employs a picture, so you can upload an image as part of the matching, and then you have to determine where on this, acid to base range, where do these particular items fall, okay? So the first one is E, well, which one would be E, right? And then which one would be C, and so forth. So I'm going to randomly assign these. Okay. And you can do the same. Question 11 is a multiple select. So it's a multiple choice with more than one option. And in this case, it's a map. And it's asking for which of these two choices identify the statements below. Okay. So you can choose whichever ones you think apply. Question 12 is your straightforward, good old-fashioned multiple choice. Question 13 is a Likert scale. You would see these on surveys, right? So if you wanted to build in a survey question, you could. For example, your last question on the test could be, to what extent do you feel that you've been successful on this course or on this test or something to that effect? And they're all going to say, very well. Who knows? Question 14 is an ordering. So you're going to put these things in their proper order, which happens first, second, third, and fourth. Question 15, another fill in the blank. 16, one of them was a short answer and one is an essay. So this would be another place where they could type. The interesting thing about using the test questions for short answer and essay, though, is that it has the full opportunity here to incorporate some multimedia. So it's kind of neat. You can actually ask students to record themselves as their answer to the test question, or maybe you're asking them to demonstrate something so they can record themselves doing that task. Or maybe you ask them to go and find an image or a picture that represents something so they can use the mashup to bring that in. There's just a lot more options, really, when you think about how we can engage students in showing their learning. And question 7, of course, is your true-false, okay? Now, I'm going to try to submit this test, and I have intentionally left questions blank. So when I save and submit, I get a pop-up that tells me that I have left the following questions. So I can cancel and return to the test to finish those questions, or I can click OK and go ahead and submit it anyway. Okay, so I'll click cancel. And one of the things that was following me as I was taking the test is this blue bar at the top called question completion status. If I click on that, it shows me the questions I have forgotten to do or that I skipped. Okay, so I can go back and I can do those questions. Okay, so now I have a visual before I save and submit of which ones I did not complete. Okay. So I'm just going to submit it regardless. I'm going to say okay and let it take my questions. The student immediately gets some feedback, and really the first thing that you're told is when you started it and when you submitted it. So you can kind of see how long it took you to take the test, right? And then you get your submission stamp. So it was submitted on this date and this time. If you scroll down to the bottom, there's a little OK in the corner. You can click on OK, and it will take you to your test. Now, you get to set up how much the students get back. Okay, so you can tell Blackboard to hold off the review, or you can tell Blackboard to just tell the students how many points they got, or just tell the student the correct answer. You get to configure all of that information. Is there any format given on Blackboard for different subjects? As far as test formats, to create the test? No, there's question types, but they're not subject specific, right? Certainly some of them lend themselves better to some subjects than others. For example, if you're anatomy and physiology, that hotspot question is pretty handy to identify, bones in the body or that sort of thing. But it's not specific by subject. It's really more question type. What you can investigate, though, if you're interested, if you have a textbook that you use, you can check with the publisher. A lot of textbook publishers have cartridges, is what they're called, for Blackboard. They're really a zip file, and you can import that into your course, and a lot of those will have test banks that are already created, so test pools of questions. I would just encourage you to be sure you review those questions. Sometimes, I mean, when I used to work on a campus with faculty, we found a lot of the time there were some answers that were incorrect or the question was poorly constructed. So sometimes you'll just want to verify that. Okay. So it does tell the student not only how many points they earned out of how many were possible, but it will also tell them if there's something that still needs grading. Because sometimes you will have a short answer or an essay that you need to come back in and grade. So the student has only earned so many points. They haven't earned all of it yet. Okay. So you can take a look at that. And when you're done looking at yours, when you click OK, it'll bring you right back into your lessons area. Okay. So all we did there was we just looked at a test. We practiced taking one. So what we're going to do now is practice setting a test up. How do you create a test and put the settings around it that you're looking for? Okay. We're only going to create a one-question test because obviously for time constraints, if we each created a test, we'd be here all afternoon. We all got 100. Not with that topic. I'm telling you, that is not my forte. I'm going to have to review. Okay, so in order for us to be able to build, we need to make sure we turn our edit mode back on in the corner. So come up here to the right and make sure you turn your edit mode back on. And now you have your toolbar at the top, okay? All right. To add a test, that's going to be under Assessments. And of course, you want to choose the first one, which is Test. Now in this case, if you have already created a test, you could add it here. It would be in this list, right? But we're going to create a brand new test. So you're going to click the button to create. And the first thing it wants to know before you can even build any questions is a name for the test and then a description or some instructions, okay? So this is just a sample test. I'll just call it that, sample training test. You can call it whatever you'd like. Now there's description and there's instructions. And a lot of people say, well, what's really the difference? There's not a distinct difference. What Blackboard looks at is a description might be that this test covers chapters 2 through 4, or this is on the history of ocean exploration, right? The instructions might be you are going to need a calculator for part of this test, or this is a time test, or anything like that. Now certainly you can put them all in one place. You don't need to use these two boxes separately. That's up to you. And then when you configure the settings, you select which one you're going to show to students, and usually it's both if you use both. But if you're going to strictly use the descriptions, then use that box. That's okay. It's all the same. So here is the test description. All right. So all you're doing on this panel is naming it and giving a little bit of a description. Once you click Submit, it takes you to the test canvas. This is where you build your test, okay? And so we're just going to try to build a one-question test. And of course, if there are 23 of us in the room and each of us chooses a different question, then we probably will have questions on how it's working. So see what you can do with it. It's fun to just play and give it a try. You could create a question maybe that you haven't used before. So if you've built true, false, or multiple choice tests, give a different type of question a try today. Okay, so all you do is come up to create a question, and from this master list here, you can choose the type of question you would like to create. I'm going to grab the either or question because it is a short one to configure. So I'll grab either or. No matter what question you chose, you have to put in question text. Do you see that little asterisk? That means that there has to be a question itself, right, for students to do. So this is where I'm going to type the question for the student. And then if you come down under the box, you get to choose whether you want your answer choices to be vertical or horizontal. Again, a lot of this doesn't seem to matter as much, but you get a lot of choices. My answer choices, do I want yes, no? Do I want agree, disagree? Right, wrong, or true, false? I'll choose agree, disagree. And then I also get to tell Blackboard which one is the correct answer, right? So you have to choose. If you're doing multiple choice or something else like that, there will be a little radial button next to your options, and you have to tell it which one's the correct one. Okay. Now, what is feedback? Well, if you wanted to get really involved, you can give students feedback if they choose the correct answer. And you could say, yes, that is correct, because, right? You can also give students feedback if they choose the wrong answer. That is incorrect, because. Now, if you're setting up a test to be a test of, that students can take multiple times, you can create a test as a learning tool or as a review tool, and then your feedback becomes really important because you're helping the student understand why it was wrong. Okay. So feedback you don't have to do, but you could. I chose the either or question. Yep. And if you chose a different question, you're going to have different options, certainly. Every question type at the bottom has something called categories and keywords, and you can add those if you think you're going to reuse this question later, because it helps you filter your pool. Any question that you create is saved in your course, and so if you're going to, let's say you're going to have, 6 or 8 quizzes along the way, and then you're going to create a final exam, and you want to pull questions from those quizzes, you would be able to filter your pool and look for them based on category or topic or something like that. But you actually have to add that in here. And there's something called instructor notes at the bottom. That's a note to you. If for some reason you need to remind yourself, this question came from page 12 in the blue book, or something like that. Maybe you want to put a citation in here for a picture or for an article that you included in the question. Those are simply instructor notes. So you could practice configuring a question type, and when you're done, you would just submit it. And then your question lives here on your test canvas. Okay? I love when you get a green bar, because green bars mean success, that what you did worked. You can get red bars and you can get yellow bars as well. All right, so if I wanted to add another question, I have a plus sign before and after this one. I can just click the plus sign and add a new question. I get to choose which one to add next. Okay, so you can do that. The other thing that you can do is change the points. Do you see on the right? By default, it is 10 points. That's just a default setting. Perhaps I don't want my points to be 10 points. I want them to be 2 points. I can update that here. Okay. So that is where you would build your test questions. Now, of course, you could be here for a while building multiple questions, and it would take you a long time. But we're going to talk about what happens next after you've actually built the test. Okay? So I'll give you a moment, make sure that everyone has finished the test question that you tried. Does anyone need more time to finish configuring your question? Give me a check or a yes. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and move on to the settings. Okay. No problem. Again, a lot of this is stuff that, you kind of have to come back to and just practice when you have the time to do that. That's another challenge of all of this. You do learn by doing, and you learn by teaching too, right? So here's my test canvas. Let's say I've built a 10-question test, whatever it happens to be. I can simply scroll down to the bottom, and so can you, and you just click this OK button. Okay. So now I created a test, and my test is here in the box. So I can click on Sample Test and say Submit. So far, all I've done is I have named my test, given it a description, and created the questions, right? Now, this is where you get all of the options for how do you want this to roll out to students. That includes everything from timing. It includes any exceptions for students with any particular accommodations, and I'll show you how to do that. So these are all different things that are configured here in the test options, okay? So we'll scroll down. You can see that it brings in the description that you used in case you want to edit your description. And it says, do you want to show the description to students? Yes, I do. All right, so here we are in our test options. The other thing here is availability, right? How do you want this to roll out to students? How many attempts do you want them to have, and so forth. You can also add a new announcement, which is a nice feature. If you check that box, that means that when you submit this, students will get an announcement in their course that says there's a test that will be available until whatever date and time, okay? All right, so you can set multiple attempts here. If you select multiple attempts, again, just like with the assignment, you have to tell Blackboard which one to grade. Do they grade the last one, the highest, the average, and so forth? Because it doesn't know. It's got, 2 or 3 tests sitting there. What do I do with it? So you have to tell it which ones to take the grade for. So I'll turn off multiple attempts. This forced completion, that means that you don't get a save button. Once you start the test, you have to finish it in one sitting because the timer starts running and you have to finish it. Or when the timer runs out, Blackboard will suck your test back and give your instructor only what you were able to complete. Okay? So forced completion is a good thing to turn on. It allows students to have to do the test in one sitting. Otherwise, they do have the ability to pause the test and go away and come back and resume it right where they left off. The timer, if you want to set a timer, you can. This will record the completion time for your students, and they will see a little timer up in the upper right-hand corner while they're taking the test. For some people, that's incredibly distracting, but for others, it's something that they don't mind or that they ignore, so that's up to you. And if you set the timer, you have to tell it how many minutes. And auto-submit. Auto-submit is something where if it's on, once the timer is up, Blackboard saves the test and submits it. If the auto-submit is off, the student can actually continue after the timer. It will note for you when the student completed, like how long it took them to do it. So you'll know how many minutes over the time they did. But it does allow them to continue. It doesn't allow them to stop the test or pause it. It just allows them to continue to take the questions even after the timer has gone off. Okay. These display dates are access dates. In other words, they're when the student can see the test all the way until when you want to hide it. Okay. I'm going to show you some exceptions. In previous learning management systems, depending on what you were using, if you had a student who needed more time, let's say, or who needed different dates to take the test, or some other accommodation, you would have to have made a copy of that test and then set those settings differently for that student. In this case, in Blackboard, we're going to do all of that on the same test. So this is where I set any exceptions. So I have to click Add a User, and I have to select somebody from my list. So let's say, Noah might need extended time. So I'm going to select Noah and submit. So here I have Noah. He still only gets one attempt, but I'm going to give him extended time. Okay? And I'll auto submit. Now, I can add another user, maybe James. James might need the standard time, but he might need his test available at a different day and time. Maybe he's having surgery or something and he can't take it on that day or time. And I can add yet another user and give them multiple attempts, right? So any exceptions that I have in my course, I can do them all right here on one test. And so by user, the students will get the test that is configured for them. Yeah, Maureen, this part is definitely easier. It is. And at any time, you can come in here and remove it for one student or remove all of your exceptions. So that's a really nice function. All right, and then we have the due date that you're used to. Anytime you put a due date on, it populates your course calendar. I love this checkbox. This is really handy. If you check this, it does not allow students to start the test after the due date. Okay. Otherwise, if you don't check this box, and the due date was today at 11:59, a student can start the test at 11:59 or 12:01 tomorrow, and they still get 60 minutes to sit and take it, as long as the test remains open. Now, if I set an access date, an availability date, and I close the test, of course, they can't even get in there. Yeah. Okay. So the exceptions, Marcia, the exceptions, if they have a different date, then they can still access. Okay. So if I have given a certain student a different date range to take the test, it's still open for that student. Okay. There are some test options here, whether or not you want to include it in the gradebook or hide the results. And then this panel here is where you set up your feedback, what feedback students get and when they get it. So for example, after students submit, what do I want them to see? I can give them their score, sure. I don't want them to see all answers, and maybe I don't want them to see the correct answers yet. I might want to wait until after the due date, and then I can show them all the answers. Or I might want to wait until all attempts are graded before I show them all answers. So you can decide here what students get upon submission, also what they get after everything has been graded or after the due date. Okay? Because sometimes if you have items to grade, such as an essay, you maybe don't want them to see all the answers on the test until you've gone through and graded everyone, right? And then once everybody has been graded, you don't mind releasing that feedback. And then lastly, the test presentation is simply how do you want it to roll out to students. The sample test that you took on oceanography was all at once. Every question was right there on one page, and you just scroll through and answer. You can do one at a time. Students see one question, they answer it, they submit it, they get the next question. Okay, so those are your choices. You can prohibit backtracking, which means if they go back in the test, they can't change an answer that they've already submitted. And then you can randomize the questions as well. So that means that if I'm taking a test and I have question 1, 2, and 3, it might be in a different order for Kathleen or for Marcia, right, if they take the same test. Okay, so we can just click submit there, and you have, so Kathleen won't cheat. Exactly, exactly, especially if we're sitting in a room next to each other, for goodness sakes. All right, so you've configured your test, and again, I do understand that that's a lot of settings, a lot of options to go through in such a time constraint and also to even remember, so I don't expect you to remember everything, okay? The only other point about using the survey, and again, that's under assessment, you can set up a survey. You also get a canvas where you can put questions, just like when you built a test. The only difference is surveys are anonymous and cannot be graded. Okay? Surveys are anonymous and cannot be graded. So you have to know that if you want to have something that's graded, you would use the test feature, even if it's not technically a test, okay? Because surveys can't be graded. All right, so I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to turn off app sharing so we can return to the whiteboard. Okay. This way we can wrap up and make sure that we take the last 8 or 9 minutes or so to wrap up any questions that you might have. And I just want to make sure that you're aware some of the grading questions that maybe kind of came up when you were previewing the Grade Center. We're going to address that in Workshop 5. We're going to look at a full tour of the Grade Center. We're also going to look at more under the Course Management panel that was on the lower left. And we'll talk about what the Retention Center is and how you can use that. We'll learn how to archive, export your course, import. Okay. And again, my email is there for you if you wanted to contact me about anything. But I will follow up with you with all the slides and everything, all the resources that we went through today. So thank you to everyone who hung in there for either 2 or 4 hours today. And you all deserve a pat on the back and a break tonight. So you can go home early, I told you to. Take care. I hope to see you back for Workshop 5.